American flag is flown at half-staff at the White House to pay tribute to the late President Jimmy Carter. President Biden issued a proclamation declaring a national day of mourning on January the 9th. He also ordered U.S. flags to be flown at half-staff for 30 days on federal buildings, military posts, and naval stations, as well as all naval vessels. We want to bring in Randy Lewis this morning, who served with President Carter at the White House. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, so what do you think the media and the public maybe misunderstood about President Carter or his presidency, since you had such a firsthand experience?
Part of it is the headwinds that he encountered upon being sworn in. A lot of people have forgotten that he was the first president after Vietnam, the first president after the resignation of Richard Nixon and Watergate, the first president who was dealing with a new organization called OPEC at the time. And so there were fairly significant headwinds. His first job on the first day in the White House was to restore confidence in the presidency and the government. And he was, for the most part, very successful with that.
What do you remember specifically about President Carter's very first day on the job in terms of restoring confidence in the presidency and the government writ large?
Well, here's the interesting thing about Jimmy Carter. His first day in the presidency was some 44 years ago. So for many of us, it's become a blur. It's unusual to have a president who lived this long after their presidency. And his life was so full after the presidency that a lot of his achievements in that post-presidency have blurred the success of the White House that day. But I would say that there was a sense in the White House and among the staff that it was a new beginning, a new start after the obvious problems of Vietnam and Watergate and the resignation of President Nixon. And let's also remember that Jimmy Carter assumed the presidency from Gerald Ford, a man who was never elected to the presidency. He was an appointed vice president who became president. So it was a very interesting time, and obviously something that had not occurred in history before.
It is interesting to look back. There are very few people who get to be near the president at Camp David. President Carter is seen as the force behind the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt in 1979. In many ways, some say the modern Middle East was shaped by him. Can you give us your thoughts while you were with him at Camp David?
Well, I was not with him at Camp David, but I was taking part in the shuttle diplomacy as we flew back and forth between Israel and Egypt during the negotiations. That shows, well, it's a great example of the intensity of Jimmy Carter. I believe that the talks broke down twice, and it wasn't Menachem Begin or Anwar Sadat who put it back together. It was Jimmy Carter who, through his sheer personal will, put the negotiations back together. And it did reshape the Middle East and has set up the progress that we've enjoyed over the last 50 years in the Middle East. And in many respects, it's what President Trump is going to be dealing with as he attempts to restart the Abraham Accords.
Absolutely. Can you, before we let you go, share just a memorable moment or an interaction you personally had with President Carter that stands out in your mind, in your memory?
It was constant encouragement. I was the youngest member of the staff. I actually started there a month before my 21st birthday.
Oh, wow.
And I'm remarkably, I'm still the youngest member of Carter's White House staff. But the Oval Office was really just 20-some steps from my office, and I was in and out of the Oval Office 3 or 4 times a day. And I think he always saw me as Randy standing in the back of the room opposite him, because I was behind a bank of cameras anytime the media was in the Oval Office. And all I ever received from him was encouragement.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
It seems very fitting for who we've heard him to be. Randy Lewis, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you.